Distinguished fratres and sirs, greetings and welcome to yet another session of the Grant Administrators e-Forum. My name is Sarah Nefertiti Ohimine, and I am the moderator for this session. You will recall that in the first week of February 4th to be precise, we had a session with the Grant Administrator, and it was titled God and the Cosmic. So today, February 18th, we'll continue, but the title instead is The God Concept. Before we move directly into the session, please, I would like to remind us of the rules. All microphones will be muted as usual to avoid callback effects. And if for any reason your microphone is not muted, kindly assist us by muting when you are not talking. In other words, let's just be mindful of background noise. If you have enabled your video, although this is a webinar, so I might just skip that, but let's be mindful of our background. Limit distractions. We can make it easier to focus on this session by turning off notifications, closing or minimizing running apps, and using our smartphones throughout the duration of this session. My sincere apologies for the technical glitch just experienced. So as I was saying, we are live on our YouTube channel. And if you're experiencing network glitches, you can join us there as well. The link has already been pasted in the chat area. So we are ready for the topic of today, the God. Most worthy grant is already on stand, sir. Our most worthy grant administrator and director of Supreme Board of AMOC, Frater Kenneth U. Idiodi. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, dignitaries, fratres and sorors. I want you, wherever you are, to sit relaxed and calm yourself by some deep breathing. Taking a deep breath, hold it for a few seconds without discomfort, and exhale slowly. In and out, while sending out thoughts of love, of healing, and of strength to our fellow human beings throughout the face of the earth, and indeed to all of creation. Feel yourself at home with yourself, free from the multifaceted challenges and problems of the world, and be at peace with yourself and with nature. Be still and feel the holiness within you and around you at this moment as we unite in invocation. God of our hearts, God of all creation, God of our realization, we assemble in your divine presence. With gratitude in our hearts and minds for the opportunity to contemplate the mysteries of creation, of thy divine laws, and of the human being. Grant us what it takes to be at peace with you, with nature, and with our common humanity. And let our acts of service be to your glory and the good of all. So much it be. Brothers and sorors, just 2 weeks ago, we shared thoughts about God and the cosmic. Today, and based on questions and matters arising, let us draw inspiration from the thoughts of our past imperator, Ralph Maxwell Lewis, on the concept of God. As usual, I suggest that we pay attention so that during the forum that may follow, we can enjoy full participation and interaction from all and sundry. Remember that in this series, brothers and sorors, I'm taking all of us back to the fundamentals of our Rosicrucian mystical philosophy, which is why I have referred to these sessions as Back to Basics series. It is my hope that we all benefit from the sharing of thoughts as well as the interactions that follow. A basic doctrine of theology is the sameness of divinity in all men. If all men could appreciate, be conscious of this essence alike, and alike rationally define its nature and function, there will be a unification of all religion. Alas, this is not so. Therefore, we have religions, and each religion has its God. Each has its prophets who profess to be divinely inspired and who bequeath to their followers an ideal of God obtained through direct communion. The ideals clash. Religionists oppose and denounce the ideals of each other. Is God an imperfect factor? Is he moving forward towards an eventual attainment and final excellence? Such a hypothesis would not be approved by modern theology, nor even be consistent with the religious conception of a barbaric people. It would detract from acknowledging God's supremacy and God's omnipotence. A review, however, of the history of religion and an examination of the doctrines of today's sects reveal a startling similarity to such a hypothesis because of the discrepancy in the definitions of the nature of God. We find that the splendor attributed to God by present-day theology surpasses in many respects that of the past ages. Further, we find that his accomplishments of today are manifold in comparison to those ascribed to him in other eras. Once he possessed a multiplicity of forms, but man now has him as a single entity, and even as an impersonal intelligence pervading all. It is, however, declared fervently by modern creeds and sects that nevertheless, the God of yesterday, today, and of tomorrow is the same. They declare he is the only unchangeable factor in a universe of change. If he be unchangeable, perfect, and excellence supreme, how can the religionists reconcile that with the obvious difference of nature ascribed to him by all who recognize him? Obviously, Francis Msuros, all conceptions cannot be right. Some must be erroneous. If one group of human minds cannot interpret the divine impulse in their own nature correctly, then all men can possibly likewise err. In defense of the religionists, it can be said that some perceive more nearly the divine in their nature than others, and their realization participates more closely in the divine reality. But who are they? What criterion is there to ascertain the accuracy of man's perception of God? Sincerity of purpose is not sufficient to judge the accuracy of one's conception of God. Man, in his sincere endeavors to persuade his fellow man that he or his sect alone has envisaged God and is the medium for his word, resorts to the strangest fanatical practices which in themselves detract from the sublimity of God. The sublimity one feels rather than knows. Which is of the greater value to man? The ideal of God that he must endeavor to approach, or the expression of that ideal in a form composed of words? Most often, man's spiritual ideal, like the moral code which he graciously accepts, is an inheritance. His father's God and his father's father's God becomes the blessed guardian of the virtues of a higher life. Much of the intolerance and bigotry that may encompass parents' faith, he alike accepts. He resents the questioning of any of the doctrines of his faith or his interpretation of the God he has accepted. It is not because he has come to know that God and through such infinite contact has experienced what he previously only believed, but merely because it affects his pride, his human ego, to have his judgment or the judgment of his kinsmen challenged. Man, then, seems to become a small member of religionism. Unquestionably, one might say, he has accepted a prescribed faith, one that has been prepared for him. He accepts a God not as he has come to know him, but rather as he has been prepared for his acceptance by someone else. He is content to feel satisfied and assured in his righteous selection of his faith, even when his neighbor may differ from him on every doctrine of religious belief. His neighbor may be an adherent of a faith as recognized and as established as his own, but as different as daylight from darkness. The incongruity troubles him not at all. The insistent claimants of the different faiths do not disturb him, nor cause him to realize that there can be but one God and not the varied gods of the multi-religions. God, to such an individual, is not a personal experience, but rather a magnificent picture or ideal that has been transplanted into his consciousness. It has not been born from a personal germ of thought, spiritual perception, or from aspiration. God, to such an individual, is not a guide or infinite master whom one may call a companion, but just a stabilizing force. The God concept is merely a means of keeping him walking the straight path of society. He can change it as often as he wishes. As long as he serves his purpose, he is content to go to his grave with no further intimate contact with this God, which he has taken to himself. I say taken to himself because certainly he has not developed this God from within. To such men or women, no praise should go for merely that homage which they periodically pay by participation in numerous rites and support of exoteric ritual, for such action is not prompted primarily by spirituality. The absolute lack in the majority of instances of a knowledge of their God and the methodical manner of their devotion is indicative of an inherent fear rather than something born of inspiration. Their God has become to them a champion of a great ethical and moral code. They accept him because it's an integral part of their faith. The only impelling urge associated with their God is a fear of his omnipotence, which they do not understand. Alas, they see no need for even an understanding. They merely follow the theology of their faith with its dogma and creed. It is difficult for those who have merely acquired God, merely so acquired God, to see the necessity for him. They live their daily lives so completely devoid of any real comprehension of his multi-works and his all-pervading intelligence that they know not of their true relation to him, yet they fear him. Brothers and sisters, man can never know God from without, no matter how alluring and magnificent may be the description given him, if he lacks within himself a responsivity to spiritual urge. Man cannot accept the God defined by another if the description does not invoke within him a sympathetic appreciation. The eyes of an artist and of a physicist may view the same dawn, but the idea engendered in the consciousness of each is different. One appreciates the mechanics of what he sees, the physical law accounting for the phenomena, and the other, the artist, feels the harmony of the color, its balance, its proportion, and the exhilaration of true beauty, which actuates the sensitivity of his soul. Each could comprehend the idea of what the other perceives, but neither will have the same emotional feeling toward that idea as he would for his own. To every man who is a theist, God is the summum bonum, and he instinctively endeavors to pattern his life in accordance with this divine good he sees in life and in human conduct. This, brothers and sisters, is religion's greatest duty, the defining of what constitutes the good in human action and in all things perceived by man. Because of this, religion could easily be unified. But when it attempts to limit God to form, to describe his nature, confusion arises. And thereby also come into being those who are said to be atheists. Religion has called the first cause God, or the equivalent in all languages. However, it is the varying characteristics which religion has attributed to God at different times, as we have stated, which have brought about the confusion to his nature. Let us assume that religion is right and that God is the first cause. then do the things that follow from the cause do so by intent or by necessity? If the cause is intentional or purposeful, it must be of the mind. The only comparison we have for conscious causes is ourselves. If God is an intentional cause or mind, he will have of necessity certain characteristics similar to those of the human mind. He will, for instance, have the faculty of perception and thereby will perceive the present existence. Further, he will have to imagine an insufficiency that was to be overcome or a perfection needed. Thus, this first cause, if intentional, will set for itself certain ends to be attained, just as does the human mind. The religionists who reason thus have engendered for themselves certain ontological problems. They are in effect saying God is the primary substance in which all things are said to have their existence, and yet such things are also said to be the fulfillment of his purpose. It will appear then that at some time the things of his intent were not of his substance. Obviously, something which already exists or already is will have no need to become. Did God realize that his being was incomplete or imperfect and that he would need to conceive a plan and become purposeful to overcome such conditions? To accept such reasoning will mean that the divine purposes or ends which God sought were more complete at one time than his own being. Further, if God had conceived the lack of something, from whence will it come if it were not already in the substance of God himself? To answer this question by saying that God evolved the ends he realized from his own nature is equivalent to saying that God was imperfect and has been evolving towards perfection. When religion offers such reasoning, what assurances have mortals that God is still not merely evolving towards perfection and that therefore the divine is now imperfect? To meet these ontological problems, religion developed a dualism. God is one aspect of this dualism. He is absolute, perfect, and complete in himself. Since he is conceived as a mind, he is also all-wise. The other aspect is the world, namely all being other than God. God, as mind, acts upon this mass. He evolves and creates in it that which serves his own will. By this rationalization, religion has not solved the problems it faced. Rather, it has created another tremendous breach in its argument. God has created being, religion says. Thus, God has created something less perfect than himself. For although this being must be of God, yet religion will not admit that matter and the things of which our existence consists are divine substances. The mystic, Francis Rose, cannot accept a personal God. He cannot conceive of the deity as being of either sex, a he or a she, nor as having a form which is incomprehensible to man, in that it is equal to anything of which man has knowledge. To the mystic, for God to be anthropomorphic, that is to be of the image of man, is to imply that the human finite mind is equal to an all-inclusive realization of the nature of God. Since it is so very apparent that man is ignorant of many of the ways of his own being, for him to assume to have complete knowledge of the extent of God is to the mystic an impious thought. Further, reasons the mystic, can God be confined by the limits, the forms, which man's mind is able to conceive? To the mystic, the universe and all that exists must be explained either as a capricious mechanistic phenomenon with order as a notion of man's mind or as an infinite intelligence, such as a moving cause with its lesser dependent causes which accounts for all things. As the mystic is not an agnostic, he accepts the principle of an intelligent cause, of a divine mind, as the primary motivating universal force. How does he overcome the difficulties that the religionist has in explaining the relationship between a mind cause and the physical world? If God is mind and therefore causative, how is matter to be explained? If divine mind created the gross substances which men perceive and have named matter, from what did this mind create them? Since to the mystic, the divine mind is all-being, limitless, all-inclusive, there could have been no other substance from which it could create physical properties, matter, and even souls. To the mystic, a belief that the physical world, material substance, was generated out of a state of nothing is inconsistent with the nature of God. Since God is everything to the mystic, there could not be any condition or negative state of nothing which will exist concomitantly with or beyond him. If something can be created out of nothing, then nothing is something. If anything else existed, then that will limit the nature of God, for at least God will not be that thing. Brothers and sisters, the phenomena which men recognize as matter and which science demonstrates as having existence must therefore have come from the nature of God, this divine mind. If it came from God, it never really was created, for it always would have been. If this divine mind constitutes all of the realities in the universe, all being, in other words, it must always have been. There could not have been any beginning for the divine mind, for whence will it have come? Since the divine mind is eternal, then that which is of its nature, or the substances which flow from its physical realities, for example, are likewise eternal. To the mystic, then, the divine mind did not create the earth, the worlds beyond, and all the material particulars of which we have knowledge. Their essence, the radiations and energies of which they are composed, are of the nature of this divine intelligence and have always been. They change, yes, just as the mind itself is ever active in the changing of consciousness. The true mystic, then, is very definitely a pantheist, namely, to him, God is in everything, everywhere. To the mystic, the stone, the tree, the bolt of lightning, as well as man himself, are of God. These things are not creations of God, they are of the nature of God, the divine mind. To the mystic, this simplifies one of the greatest theological and philosophical problems of the centuries, that of trying to reconcile the spiritual with the temporal. Since all things are of the divine mind, there is not the difficulty of trying to show a relationship between two conditions which are ordinarily conceived as diametrically opposed. As an analogy, darkness is not a positive state, such as is light. It is only a lesser manifestation of light. Does this mean that the mystic has the same adoration for a tree and a mountain, for example, the Orthodox religionist will have for his God? The mystic replies to this query by asking, and where is God? Since God, or the divine mind, the mystic, is ubiquitous, pervades everything and is everywhere, things of which he is conscious. Each thing which manifests does so by virtue of the intelligence of God, which intelligence constitutes the properties of the thing that man perceives. The mystic does not see God remote in a legendary region or within the confines of a temple or a cathedral or off in a corner of the universe, but rather in each breath which he takes into his lungs, in each sunset, in each leafy bough. There is this distinction. Each particular which the mystic perceives is not all of the divine mind, but rather just one of an infinite variety of his expressions. Consequently, the mystic is not that kind of pantheist who is a nature worshipper. Since to the mystic, the divine mind pervades all, no one thing depicts all of the divine nature. Just as the personality and abilities of a great man cannot be known by any single one of his accomplishments, even so, fratres and sorors, the divine mind cannot be conceived by a study of any one of its myriad phenomena. Since the divine mind is all-inclusive, the mystic realizes that his devotion must also be all-embracing. Each thing of nature which man discovers, the mystic reveres as one member, one finite part of the infinite divine being. He therefore devotes his spiritual love to no one thing or substance. Conversely, nothing, no matter how mean its effects upon his well-being, is to be considered entirely outside the bounds of the divine being. God, to the mystics of old, was thought to be unknown for two reasons. First, the intelligence of man was so inferior that it was not possible for him to comprehend God in his entirety or to really know God in any sense of the word. Thus, the mystic contended that man should not attempt to use the brain, which was of the mortal body, to reason as to the nature of God, or try to define him and state what he is or what he is not, because that would presume that man's consciousness is capable of embracing the idea of God. Second, it was contended that man must transcend, even rise above the use of the intellect, because the intellect is of the body. That if man even presumes to say that there is a God, he implies that intellectuality, he has some knowledge of the existence of him. The mystic stated that man must give up entirely the attempt to know God through the reason or the intellect, but he must enter into a state of contemplation and meditation, where he will free his mind of any conception as to whether God is or is not, and permit himself to be absorbed into the absolute, that is, into the very nature of God. When he is absorbed into the nature of God, he will have a feeling of serenity and peace. And that alone is the only divine reality by which he will come to feel God and will approach him. Fratres and sorors, I want to summarize these entire thoughts that we are sharing at this moment by referring to a story. Most of us are probably familiar with the Indian parable about the 6 men of Hindustan who went to learn about the elephant, though all of them were blind, each touching a different part. One touched the tusk, and feeling the round, smooth, and sharp tusk, said the elephant is like a spear. Another touched the swinging tail and said the elephant is very much like a rope. Yet another touched and felt the knee and said the elephant was very much like a tree. Another touched the squirming trunk and said the elephant was very much like a snake. Then the one who chanced to touch the ear said, no one can deny the fact that the elephant was very much like a fan. Finally, the one who touched the broad and sturdy side of the elephant exclaimed that even the blindest man will admit that the elephant was very much like a wall. This parable ends by saying that though each was partly in the right, yet all of them were wrong. The elephant is the elephant. The essence of this parable is that while each blind man is proclaiming what he believes the elephant to be is an absolute truth, in fact, all their truths are just relative based on their experience of the elephant. No one has the truth in its entirety. By implication, Francis Soros, every one of us, and indeed every human being, has his or her own concept of God. Each concept based on personal experience may be right, but in the final analysis, all of us could be wrong. The truth is that God is God. So mote it be. I will now be referring us to our distinguished moderator, Sarah Nefertiti Rehiman, through open to comments and to questions on the thoughts we have shared this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amboswadi Grand Administrator, for this beautiful session. And like he has already distinguished factors and sorrows, like he had already mentioned, this is one part of the Back to Basics series. February 4th, we had God and the Cosmic. So it is not time for us to take our questions or comments. But before we do that, I would like to remind us that we should utilize the Q&A area as shown on our screen, or if you want to ask the question or comment directly, kindly use the raise your hand feature on your screen. Also, in line with cyber security policy, anonymous questions will not be attended to. And like I usually explain to all of us here, anonymous questions in this case means devices without names. So if you have not named your device and you want to ask a question, or you leave a question, not be able to take it because we have to adhere to cyber security policy. Administrator, at the moment, we have no question. I wouldn't say Frata. There's Nixon from Long Island, New York, and he's saying, thank you for your amazing presentation. Peace profound. So I will wait for a few comments or questions, being that it's a Thursday night, so we have our Santo night. I would like to speak with our members here present that if you look at the backdrop behind our Most Worthy Grant Administrator, or the one to my right at the moment, you would see on that backdrop, we are already in the mood for the Delta Edo Zonal webinar. And that is scheduled for 19th and 20th, 2021. That is tomorrow and the day after. The theme for this zonal webinar is Transcending Limitations. Our host this time is Kutumi Lodge Wari. You will recall that at this time every year, we are usually live or on site at the Edo Delta zone for the zonal conclave. But due to what it is at the moment, we cannot have such gatherings yet. Hence, we will be live here on Zoom tomorrow and the day after. And talking about tomorrow, we will be commencing with the Methodist session. It is an open session for Rosicrucians and Methodist members. We will start at 2 p.m. It runs for 2 hours, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. And we have the Provincial Master, Brother Johnson Ikube, as well as Brother John Idiodi, as well as our most venerable Grand Administrator, who is also addressing us at the moment. He will also be presenting tomorrow. Then for Saturday, we have the presentations on the theme and sub-themes. That is theme transcending limitations, sub-theme gaining economic balance and stability, stress management and mental health. And we have wonderful facilitators from the Rosecrans University, grant counselors, professors and doctors in their various fields, and they will be with us from tomorrow till Saturday. Why am I saying this? I want you to remember, I want you to keep a date with us and be here tomorrow 2 to 4 and on Saturday at 11 a.m. The link for registration will be pasted in the chat area if we have not registered. In fact, it has been pasted at the moment. Thank you very much. So our Most Worthy Grant Administrator, we have a comment from Dominic Omenai. Good evening. I took note of what you said, sir, that man cannot know God from without, but from within. Okay, it's a question actually. My question is, how do you try to present the concept of God to those who are atheists? Most Worthy GA, did you get the question, sir?
How do you try to present the concept of God to those who are atheists? Yes.
Yes, please.
Well, yes. I can tell you that in my life, I've come across quite a few persons who declared that they were atheists. There are a number of approaches. If they say they are atheists and that they don't believe in the existence of God, you should let them be. We are in a democratic world, and there are persons who may say, I mean, there's freedom of belief, freedom of thought, that it is their fundamental human right to not believe in the existence of God and all that. But in one particular case that I recall very vividly, he said he was an atheist, and his wife also said she was an atheist. But then they went further to tell me that they believe in man. So this became very interesting, because if you believe in man, with a little stretch to your thinking, in contemplation, in analysis, and in synthesizing, you inevitably will find it easy to accept that there is a supreme being, an infinite intelligence, a universal consciousness, perhaps a divine mind, who may be responsible or is in fact responsible for all that there is, including man. Because when you analyze what man is, what he's capable of doing or not doing, and by that I mean his or her limitations, it is obvious that a little assistance from the invisible aspect of himself, or shall we say the invisible world, can help him do so much more than he ever contemplated or envisioned. And so it's easier to tell an atheist that if he believes in man or in the human being, did the human being just drop from the skies, or after the human being has lived a certain life, just disappears and that's all there is to life and living? If you begin to think with him or her along these lines, he may be led into admitting that, yes, maybe you are right, that the human being was made in the image and likeness of a superior power, factor, intelligence also. He may not be able to find certain rational explanations, as, for instance, a believer in this supreme intelligence, higher being, or God. On the other hand, you have to be very careful so that in discussing with him, you don't make him more atheistic than he was when the discussion commenced. And that is by addressing certain fundamental issues. The fact that when he goes to sleep at night, for instance, unknown to him and without any props on his part, the heart is still beating. Many other things are still functional within you and around you. And then he wakes up the following day and is back to conscious, normal existence. What aspect of him that did the dreams and visions? And what if a particular dream came out opposite or exactly the same? Or what aspects of him can be responsible for this? If you stretch him a bit, he's going to accept that there is a higher world, not visible to the physical eyes. And just as the God you are talking about is also not visible to the physical eyes. And then that thinking continues. But know that you cannot mold the picture of God for him from outside himself or herself and impose such a concept upon him or her, because in that case, you are transporting your own concept of God to him or her, and he may reject it. But he has to have a feeling from deep within him, deep within his subconscious, that there is a factor. He may not want to call it God, but it's over, above, and beyond his mortal intelligence, on the intelligence of fellow humans. And that this factor could be within him, and in fact, all pervading. And from that perspective, he can, with his own experience in life, his interactions at personal, family level, and at the social level, gradually come to terms with the fact that there is a visible world of which is a part, but transcending this mundane world is the invisible world, of which he is a part, but has either forgotten or stubbornly refuses to accept. So it's a gradual process. And for this reason, we should not, the fact that we believe in God and accept God and feel God should not be taken for granted by any of us, because we have been some way coming to reach this level where we do not just believe in God, but seek to know God and God's laws and their modus operandi, their manner of operation. Thank you. Another one is raising the hand.
Thank you very much. I'm also the grant administrator. I will be merging about 3 questions because they seem to be in the same line. Then okay. I will go check the member who raised his or her own hand. So Basil Nguchuku is asking, how do you truly understand God amidst the challenges being encountered by man? Then Basil Sochika is also asking, is the statement seeking for the mind of God wrong? Then the final one from Peter Igwe, if God is incomprehensible, are we not wasting our time discussing the nature of God? Is it not only worthwhile to advocate that God exists, man exists, and that there are relationships between man and the creator God not worthy of our time to investigate?
That's it. Thank you. First of all, I like to take it from the last question, in which 3 universal truths are being acknowledged by these fratres. The first one, that God exists. The second one, that the human being exists. And the third, that a certain definite relationship exists between God and the human being. It is in the process of investigating and exploring what the nature of this relationship is and how God can help the human being, and interestingly enough, how the human being can assist God to help him or her, that the mystery about the incomprehensibility of God arises or is diminished. If, from the mystical point of view, through contemplation, through meditation, through prayer, through attunement, we try to understand the relationship between God and the human being, we are beginning to gradually comprehend the nature of God, because we will at last come to terms with the fact that we know the laws of God, which are God. So, by that process, we actually cannot only begin to seek for the mind of God, which incidentally is in us, the subconscious mind, and it's through the domain of the subconscious mind that as mystics, we approach God and commune with God. This mind is already in us. The kingdom is already in us. God is already in us and around us and everywhere simultaneously. It is by understanding this relationship that we begin to gradually comprehend God through the manner of operation of natural and spiritual laws in creation, that we now go back to this first question, in which we can cope with the challenges, the tests, trials, temptations, tribulations, and vicissitudes of life, because through the processes we have mentioned, we are able to work in partnership with God to not only help us to resolve life's major issues, but to be worthy agents in and channels for God to use in assisting others. Let me hope that I have, beginning with the third question, incorporated answers that relate to the first and the second. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amoswadi Grant Administrator. Frater Boniface Upong, your hand was up at a time, so would allow you to talk right now if you are ready. Frater Boniface, okay. We can't hear you.
Just to let you know, in case you can hear me now, that I'll be rounding off with an attunement exercise as soon as you have taken the last question.
Okay. Then, since Frater Boniface is not talking to us yet, we have two more questions. One from Ryan Clark, and he's asking, so call the name of God is promoting God. Hence, are you really an atheist? That's his question.
Yes, we have gone beyond creeds and dogmas when we look at the overall picture. In other words, the fact that somebody may spend long hours talking about God or doing things related to God does not necessarily translate to experiencing God. So, yes, in a way, if an atheist, if somebody says an atheist, but he's still, you have quite a few persons who say they are atheists, they affirm it. But the moment they are confronted with some danger, they exclaim, oh God, God help me, God save me, God save them, God save us, and so on. The spontaneity with which that came from within such a person that proves that he perhaps did not totally disbelieve that there was God after all. In other words, there are many who call God or God's name or say they don't believe in God, but when confronted with some danger or very challenging circumstances over, above, beyond them, they seek assistance from this higher source. So the issue then is not being able to promote God by exclamations or calling, but learning to develop an intimate personal relationship. Members of various religious sects, denominations, try to do in their own way and style, bearing in mind that all the various paths eventually lead to the one source from which we all came and to which we all return. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amoswadi Grant Administrator. A question for Samuel Iyibo. God and the cosmic masters, to whom do some Rosicrucians pray to? I have overheard and seen many times when some Rosicrucians pray, they end it with, if it pleases the cosmic masters, it is done. Now, the questions I would like to ask are, Is it God or the cosmic masters they are praying to? Who are these cosmic masters? Do the cosmic masters have the
Okay, you see.
most
Hello?
worthy GA? Did you get the question, sir?
Yes. You broke off in the middle, but let me see, and let me attempt to recapitulate whether, the question seems to be that when Rosicrucians pray, they end it with, if it pleases the cosmic masters, it is done, or and so on and so forth.
It is done.
Rosicrucians are not, hello, yeah, Rosicrucians are not praying to the cosmic masters. Rosicrucians pray to God in this manner, individually and at the personal level. God of my heart, God of my realization. That is the God that I feel very intimate and close to from the depths of my heart. And then we also add God of my realization. The God that I realize, that I understand, that I strive to comprehend, and I'm in partnership with. Now, there's only one God, not many gods. It is an alignment with our perception of this God that makes us to refer to God of my heart, God of my realization. At the level of the collectivity, we can say God of our hearts, God of our realization. When we end a prayer or a petition, usually, maybe we have visualized that something should happen, which will assist us personally at the individual level, or assist a family, the group, or humanity as a whole. When we use this expression, if it pleases the cosmic masters, it is done. By that we mean that there are invisible beings who have played several roles through several lifetimes, who have gone through all these experiences that we are going through. They have gone through several professions in several lifetimes and have their bearings about life. And having completed their term here, are in a higher level to assist us and make us understand how to go or move around in this world and be in harmony, flowing with God's laws in creation, the natural and spiritual laws, so that we encounter less difficulty or have the empowerment to overcome these difficulties. Since they have had these experiences and they are in a much higher class, they are in a position to even assist us as well, to petition the Almighty, to make things lighter and better for us in our evolutionary journey. So, since these people, these beings are in a higher level, we make this fond reference when we visualize for something to happen, using our mental capabilities, our mental creation, imagination, and all that, to see through the mind's eye how we want certain things to be. And we are saying that since these higher beings, have gone through the experiences that we have gone through, if there are certain things that we don't necessarily actually have to bring before God, so be it, and we don't want to get into any complicated situation. So the idea here is this. The Rosicrucian student has been taught and is learning how to concentrate, how to contemplate with his subjective faculties, the concentration with the objective, how to visualize with the subliminal faculties of self, how to meditate, sink into the subconscious mind, which is the mind of God within us and around us, how to pray, and how to be in attunement, at one-ment with the divine consciousness, the cosmic consciousness of God within and around us. So now, it's not just everything we are going to bring before God. There are many things we can do as a result of our physical capabilities. Here am I raising this cup to take a sip of water. I don't need to pray to God to do that. Also, if I can use my mind to direct a particular situation one way or the other, and I can resolve a thorny issue with my mind, if I can use my sense and emotions to resolve an issue between me and my wife, or between my son and my daughter, or between friends and so forth, you don't need to pray to do this. You have already been equipped with the faculties, with the emotions, with the mind, and all that. You are essential being. It is when the matter is beyond you that you are going to make prayers of request. To the mystic, this is the one reason why all of our prayers are primarily prayers of gratitude. We are grateful that we have these faculties to enable us do things, make decisions and all that, and take care of our planet. And that's it. So there's a line of distinction here between a direct prayer to God, which ends with "so mote it be," and a visualization of certain things we want of a material or non-material nature, which, going by the rules and laws of creation, which we don't know enough of, and which cosmic masters, for instance, who have done all this before, know very well, and they are in a much, much higher class. We can say if it pleases them, it is done, and so forth. I hope I've tried to draw a line of distinction, a very thin line, to make it clear that Rosicrucians have various approaches in their multifaceted concepts of God.
Thank you very much, Amosuadi. So we have two hands up. We will unmute them one after the other. Eremosele Douglas, please kindly unmute and ask your question.
Good evening.
Good evening, we can hear you.
There is this contradiction that I still have in this Rosicrucianism and my religion, being a Christian. Can you all hear me? Hello?
We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. There is this contradiction, like I said, that I always have this religion and Rosicrucianism. Maybe in the aspect of God. You know, the Rosicrucian always make mention of these cosmic masters. And to me, I'm a Christian and I believe in God and Jesus Christ. So most time when I pray, as in if I pray to the cosmic, I have some kind of contradiction if really I'm attuning to the right place or not. So I want to know if the Rosicrucianism has kind of the differences with religion. So that's what I want to know more about.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. I've gotten the question. I got the question. I heard you very clearly. First of all, there can be no contradiction. Quite a good number of us are Christians by birth or by conviction, and a few also are Muslims by birth or by conviction. And we have Rosicrucians in the Far East who are Buddhists or Hindus, and Zoroastrians. And like I mentioned in the discourse today, I gave an example of the elephant, the various concepts people have about it, and the fact that in the final analysis, the elephant is the elephant. And therefore, by implication, we are also saying that God is God, regardless of our different concepts. If you look up any dictionary, you will find something pertaining to the cosmic or the cosmos or the universe. Now, God is God of the universe and of the cosmos. So you shouldn't have any contradiction at all. There is a supreme intelligence, a universal consciousness, and all that. And therefore, the God of the Christians is the same God of the Muslims, of the Buddhists, of the Hindus, just that they have different prophets. You have Buddha, you have Jesus Christ, you have the Holy Prophet Muhammad, may the peace of Allah be upon him, etc., etc., etc. They all developed and had a higher awareness of the universal consciousness that is all pervading. And through them, one religion or the other emerged, to the extent that any difference in practice, for instance, in prayer, shouldn't confuse you, Frater. If you are in the same hall, a public hall, let us say the National Arts Theatre in Lagos or the International Conference Center in Abuja, and then you have Christians and Muslims and Buddhists and all that. And then the time comes and they say, let us pray. You may have noticed that all Christians will remove their caps or hats. But at the same time, all Muslims will put their caps. The Christians see the removal of as a holy act. And the Muslims see the putting on of a hat or cap as a holy act, as a sign of reverence. Those type of things make no difference in the universal consciousness of God, who accepts both practices. The important thing being that you are not just doing so on the outside, but within you and in your depths and hearts of hearts, you feel the holiness of God within and around you, and you pay reverence and homage to that God Almighty that is within each of us. So now, in the same case, you have heard of angels, archangels, and all of these of the hierarchy, of the structure, in the invisible world. So why does it baffle you when we say that human beings like you and I, who have graduated from further coming back to this earth, are at the level of what we call cosmic masters? There should be no confusion here at all. I mean, if you say the Lord's Prayer every day, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, as a Christian and all that, you are praying to God. You can say a prayer in the Christian manner, and you should be doing so every day, morning, afternoon, evening. You can do your attunement according to the Rosicrucian principles, and you can be doing that morning, afternoon, evening. Each is helping each other to make you have a deeper and more profound understanding of God and God's laws. If you accept that this organization has members of various religious beliefs, just like a university, and indeed I call it the University of Life, then you will be broad-minded enough to accept that you need to read, if you are a Christian, try to read the glorious Quran of the Muslims. Go into things like the Bhagavad Gita, the Vedas, the Upanishads, just as you have onto the grand economy of life. Broaden your horizon, and you find that all the religions are very beautiful. And if you have the intellectual stamina or interest, research into African traditional religions. So, and you will find that there are pristine aspects of your African religion that has correspondences with these other religions. You don't condemn any religion. They are all here to make us feel at home with God, from whom we came and to whom we return. So see it as an educational approach to spirituality, and you'll be very happy with yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and most worthy Grand Administrator. So, we will be unmuting Fata Olatunde Okelano to ask his question. Fata Olatunde, kindly unmute yourself. We're waiting, sir.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Can.
I want to congratulate all the panelists and the GA for a beautiful discourse. I so much benefited a lot, and I'm glad to be part of this discussion today. And that has most of the discussion the GA had has answered most of the questions I want to ask. And I want to say thank you for me to have had the opportunity to chat with you people. Please profound.
Thank you very much, Fata. Okay, Amos Wadi Grand Administrator. There's a question from Theodore Wewili, and he's asking, what can put an end to banditry in Nigeria through communion/cosmic?
What can put
an end to banditry in Nigeria through communion/cosmic?
Through communion/cosmic.
Yes, that's the way the person ended the question.
Okay, I will attempt an answer if I'm understanding this person correctly. Everybody is concerned about acts of terrorism, of armed robbery, of banditry, of kidnapping, and so on and so forth in Nigeria and elsewhere in the world. It has become very pronounced in Nigeria. And you recall that a few months ago, on this virtual platform of Zoom, ending last year and continuing this year, we've had several Celestial Sanctum Attunement sessions. And in these, we focus not even just for Nigeria, but for the world generally, which includes all of us. Anywhere that we may be in the world as citizens, we face numerous challenges on the mundane plane. And it is the view of our order that a proper spiritual education, such as we offer, can be very helpful. And if we put our principles into practice, as we attempt to do, to the best of our ability, it can also be very helpful. But you see, among all of what we may think about, contemplate about, meditate over, are basic principles of good governance in all nations of this world. And by that we mean having more and more of the right persons in key positions to offer a responsible leadership that will attract a responsive followership. Having more and more of square pegs in square holes, round pegs in round holes. Because with good leadership, with good governance, with that rapport between the leaders and the led alike, having more and more persons who will show concern for the welfare of fellow human beings, who will show concern for infrastructural development, e.g., electricity that must work, pipe-borne water that must work, roads, rail tracks, air routes that must work, education, hospitals, all that will vibrant and must work. When you have many of such things in place, people will become so used to some system, law, order, and relative performance of government that each person will see himself as a leader in one aspect of life and a follower in another aspect of life. If we improve the education and people know their civic rights and obligations, and politicians are very conscious of their obligations of service to nation, to humanity, to God Almighty, this type of practices enhanced by employment opportunities for all, businesses that boom and all that, will drastically reduce the tendency of human beings to think negatively, speak negatively, or act negatively, which is what banditry and all these other negative things are all about. So it's not just an individual effort on our part, and many should do as much as they can wherever they are. No position is too low and none too high, but a group effort to minimize things like corruption and replace them with transparency, to help the economy to grow, and to not just pay lip service to our religious practices. So putting everything together, it requires your effort, my effort, our combined effort to raise the level of consciousness or awareness of fellow humans, which will focus attention on doing so much good to help one another that there's no room for violence, terrorism, banditry, or those negatives, or if it exists, very little. I read somewhere these last few days that 25 prisons were closed in Norway. In other words, there were no prisoners, so they started closing those prisons, meaning that the crime rate must be very, very low. But here, our prison, we call them now a different name, correction centers, are overflowing with human beings. And I think we can do better than that. You know, if we promote a spiritual education amongst ourselves and show example of leadership wherever we are, whether it's town union level or professional level, you know, by this, we should be able to assist in raising the group consciousness of people, fellow citizens, to a point where if you are in a political office, you must deliver. You must place service above self. You don't have to be in a political office before you do this. If you are at school and in the student union, you must show example by responsible behavior. We are under the COVID protocols. You must show example also by going by the safety rules and all that. When we show example by our lifestyles, it will be very easy to minimize the negativity in our midst. In my view, and today, considering today and the various other things we need to do, I think we should have time now for our closing exercise so that various members can do some other things they normally do on Thursday. And it's late in the evening for some. So
Thank
on
you
that
very
note,
much,
I
Amos,
thank you all who have made comments and asked questions. And I ask at this time that we please sit relaxed. Sit relaxed and begin to breathe in and out at our own pace, slowly. Bearing in mind that within each of us is a quiet, serene center where one can go to garner strength, regain composure, to find answers and grow in spiritual stature. This, fratres and sorors, is our soul center, where we commune with the God of our hearts, the God of our realization, the God of our deepest understanding, indeed, the God of all creation. As we continue to breathe in and out, it is important that we go to this center every day to seek renewal and guidance. During this period, we find strength and serenity to meet, conquer, and overcome life's challenges, and to move up the ladder of spiritual experience and maturity, on which we ascend slowly but surely. Feel yourself in this center. And now, let us feel this center the celestial sanctum within us. Let us all know that this center is the center of our own universe. And now, let us take in a deep breath so that when we are ready to exhale, we can feel the brilliance of the light of God within us and around us. With the second deep breath, let us acknowledge the vital life force, the breath of life, the life of God within us and around us when we are ready to exhale. And finally, with the third deep breath, let us acknowledge the love of God. And so that when we are ready to exhale, we can feel the sublimity of divine love. Let us now feel ourselves in the center of this spherical ball of light, life, and love. As we unite in invocation, may the divine essence of the cosmic infuse our beings and cleanse us of all impurities of mind and body, that we may enter the celestial sanctum and attune in pureness and worthiness. So mote it be. And now, let us feel ourselves rising in consciousness above our heads and above the house, office, the building where we are located, above the village, town, city, above the country, above the continent, above the clouds, higher and higher, bearing in mind that the celestial sanctum represents the highest plane of consciousness that can be achieved when attuning oneself with the cosmic. Let us feel ourselves reaching that level in which we are at home with the celestial sanctum, and we feel an inner serenity, be it in a landscape, whatever imagery we have, a cathedral, a mosque, a temple, immaterial, and at this level, express a prayer of gratitude to God for life and living. Recall your own concept of God. And ask God to reveal to you what you can do to improve upon your current concept of God. And with such a request, be receptive, free from all bias and prejudices, what you have read or heard about God, bearing in mind that God is God. Be grateful for an opportunity you may have for God to reveal himself to you and for you to use such knowledge to help yourself and our fellow humans, wherever they are, the family, friends, relatives, neighbors, etc. Let us be in meditation for a few seconds on this and be grateful to God for the privilege of this attunement. And now let us unite in prayer. God of our hearts, God of our realization, we are thankful for the many blessings of life, the blessings of your light, light of knowledge and illumination, the blessings of your love, which inspire, guides, and protects us, bonds us to you and to our fellow humanity. Grant us the divine empowerment to be closer to you in thought, word, and action. And let our acts of service be to your glory and the good of all. So much it be. And now, fratres and sorors, let us begin to return through the same route we ascended. Feel ourselves departing the celestial sanctum above to the celestial sanctum below. Through the clouds, through the continent, the country, the city, the town, the village, the home, the office where we are, and back to our objective level. Even as I close with this prayer, may the grace of God sanctify our individual and collective attunement with the celestial sanctum. So much it be. And let us now, fratres and sorors, become aware fully of our objective surroundings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and also the Grand Administrator. It is never a dull moment with you. It is always one inspiring session to another. Thank you very much. Distinguished fratres and sirs, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us today. We acknowledge the presence of everyone from far and near. That's why it's a virtual program. But we'll also use this opportunity to remind us all that we'll be live here tomorrow for the Delta Edo Zonal webinar, and we will commence at 2 p.m. So if you can join us at that time, it will be worth your while. So thank you very much, and do have a good evening.